Starting off with the Vanderbilt Commodores, and you really can't start the discussion of the 2026 Vandy football team without reflecting on what a historic and impressive campaign 2025 was for them, going 10-2 in the regular season, 10-3 after the bowl loss to Iowa. But let's be honest, who really cares about that? And narrowly missing out on a college football playoff berth. The last couple spots, of course, went to a 10-2 Miami team, and it looked like Vanderbilt might have an outside puncher's chance to backdoor their way in after their emphatic, to me, most impressive win of the season on the road in Neyland Stadium as a short underdog in a game that was close for a while before they just throttled them in the second half. And it really felt, despite them being 9-2 at the time, it really felt like that was the moment where Vandy kind of arrived as a real, not just respectable, but competitive program that might need to be feared in college football today. So you really just have to preface 2026 with the caveat that they've, unlike a lot of other programs in modern college football where it's what have you done for me lately, I believe that Clark Lea really has built up some goodwill, some margin for error, and some serious job security to go through a rebuild. Now, I don't think that they're looking at a full rebuild, the likes of which they have in the past, or if a team in the vein of a Vanderbilt or a Northwestern won 10 games and then graduated some big-time players and sent them off to the league would traditionally have to worry about. But you can't start the conversation without mentioning Diego Pavia, who made it to New York for the Heisman ceremony and is arguably the most significant player in the history of Vanderbilt football. Not, hand up, not a Vandy historian, but in my lifetime, nobody's come close. He really just rewrote what's possible for Vandy, for Clark Lea, coming off 3 seasons where he went 2-10, 5-7, 2-10. They transplanted the New Mexico State operation of Diego Pavia, Tim Beck, and Jerry Kill to come run sort of a service academy type modernized spread triple option, really utilized slow tempo and tried to grind the games down and invite variance via low possessions, and it worked perfectly. Going 7-6 the first year, building on it, going 10-3 last year, but they lose him, and it's going to be pretty much impossible to replace him immediately, but they do bring in 5-star Jared Curtis at quarterback, whom they flipped from Georgia, and is undoubtedly the more talented player than Pavia, but we know college football, it's not. Very little of it is about pure talent at the quarterback position. And so I'm certainly not expecting him to meet the production level and the command of the offense and the swagger that Pavia had. Side note, I almost fear that he's going to try to be Diego Pavia a little bit. He's already kind of seemed like he's taken on a little bit of that cocky swagger that Pavia had, and he might be trying to do a little bit of a Mahomes, Dylan Raiola cosplay, parasocial relationship type situation here, which worries me a little bit. But they still have Tim Beck at OC, who's been masterful there. They bring back Cedric Alexander at running back, one of the more underrated backs in the conference. Still have Junior Sherrill. Cole Adams, the transfer from Alabama, is at receiver now. So some decent pieces there, and I think that this staff, especially on offense, has earned the right to be trusted to have a baseline level of competence. This is a team that finished fifth in offense nationally in SP Plus last year. And that's tempo adjusted, right? So they're not scoring the 5th most points per game, but it is tempo adjustment almost doesn't adjust for the impressiveness that you're able to score without using tempo, because I've always thought that there's a little bit of inflation when you run the veer and shoot, no huddle offense, where you kind of leave your defense out to dry and you're a little bit gimmicky. And so you score a ton of points, but in return you're conceding, giving up a lot of points, and you really run up scores on bad teams, which skew data, kind of like those Mizzou Drew Lock offenses. The point is how impressive it is for them to finish 5th nationally in offense last year. So I'm trusting them to be okay on offense with Cedric Alexander, with some decent pieces at receiver. I think they could have done worse in the portal, going out and getting some guy from a G5. I think that there was a lot worse options there than what they got with a true freshman 5-star quarterback in Jared Curtis. And as I mentioned, Clark Lea building up a little bit of a safety net. That to me is kind of what you're seeing here come to fruition, in that, again, they don't want to go 5-7 or 4-8, but if it means going 4-8, 5-7, taking their medicine with the prospects of winning 9 or 10 games next year instead of just having to restart and go out and get another transfer portal quarterback or having a less talented option, that's something that they're willing to concede. Maybe they go from, instead of going 7-5 this year, they go 5-7, but it means they can get back to what they were last year a little bit quicker. On the defensive side of the ball, it's still Clark Lea, his brainchild, you could call it. Still Steve Gregory at defensive coordinator. Ironically, the defensive side of the ball the past couple seasons hasn't been the strength. It's been the weakness for Vandy, despite them having a defensive-minded head coach. And I'm not really worried about the talent they lose, which they bring back 5 starters, somewhere around 80th nationally in returning production. It almost doesn't really matter to me. Just, again, the defense wasn't all that good last season, and I always kind of trust Clark Lea to not be dreadful on defense outside the first couple years when he was just dealing with a totally bare talent roster. So let's dive into this schedule. And one thing I'm looking for when you lose such an important player like Diego Pavia, and you parlay that with bringing in such an inexperienced raw prospect at quarterback, I like that Vandy starts off with Austin Peay in Delaware, which, if I'm not mistaken, is that 2 FCS opponents? Austin Peay might not be anymore. Maybe Delaware, maybe one of those teams moved up. I thought those were 2 FCS teams. Then they get NC State at home. NC State, I believe, is going to be a salty bunch. They've got a good quarterback, but that's not an overly talented team that scares you. They're not going to get off the bus and beat you before getting on the field. The FPI, take it for what it's worth, gives Vandy a 71.4% chance of winning that game. I wouldn't go that high, but I would expect them to be favored there. Then they go to Auburn, to Georgia, versus Ole Miss, versus Arkansas, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, versus Alabama, at Florida, and versus Tennessee. Again, the win total here is 5.5, with the juice at minus 138 to the over, plus 112 to the under. Vanderbilt, they don't want to lose games, right? Of course, the coaches, they're never going to go into a game not wanting to give their all to win it. But to me, this season isn't really about the win total, unless they somehow got to like 9 or 10 wins. It's about keeping the train on the tracks. They've worked so hard to establish respect and a brand at Vanderbilt, and they've kind of made it cool, and they had a lot of celebrities around Nashville last year buying into the Pavia hype. So I think their primary goal this season should be, number one, just be decent, be competitive again, try to make a bowl game. If you go 5-7, that's fine, with the caveat that Jared Curtis gets better throughout the season and shows potential to live up to his 5-star hype. Obviously, we're discussing the win total. I'm going to get to that here in a second, but I think that is just kind of the vibe check around there, is they are uniquely positioned to not be as focused on record as most college football teams and fan bases traditionally are. And being at Vanderbilt, a unique institution, Clark Lea is going to be afforded that opportunity, especially considering it's his alma mater. So you're probably going to have to start 3-0, right? Because I think it's going to be tough to find 4 conference wins here. So beat NC State at home. Then you go to Auburn. That's not an unwinnable game, right? This is an Auburn team that's, we mentioned, rebuilding there a lot. They basically transplant that whole South Florida team in there. The FPI gives Auburn a 65.2% chance to win that, which sounds roughly correct to me. You go to Georgia. I like that you get that one on the road because, number one, you aren't going to win it anyway. But number two, we've mentioned with Vandy, not only do you want your certain outcomes on the road, but especially with Vanderbilt where you pretty much get your home stadium taken over by every opposing fan base in the SEC, especially ones like Georgia. So good that you get that on the road. Then you get Ole Miss at home. I am a little bit lower on Ole Miss to the point where I would maybe not be as opposed to having that one at home because it is a little bit more winnable maybe, but the proximity from Oxford to Nashville might be such that you get totally cucked in your own stadium. And then you get a great friendly stretch here to me that gives me great optimism for trying to hit over 5.5, where you get Arkansas, at Kentucky, and at Mississippi State. We would definitely prefer to get to those 3 or 3 of those 3 at home, but those are the bottom 3 teams in the league, considering Vanderbilt can't play themselves. So if you're trying to just get the bowl eligibility in a rebuilding year, having the bottom 3 teams in the league is awesome, in my opinion. But I think you need to get 2 out of these 3 because I'm just not ready to say that they have a chance to beat Alabama or go to the Swamp and beat Florida or beat Tennessee at home. They could beat Tennessee at home, especially after last year, but I kind of think last year is going to hurt them in some respect. They kind of ran the score up late. Tennessee fans are always going to take over that stadium, and I just, quite frankly, I think they're going to be pissed off and motivated to win that game, even more so than traditionally in a rivalry game. But the FPI actually favors Vanderbilt in both of those games at Mississippi State and at Kentucky, which to me is a little bit off base. The FPI has Vandy 29th and SP Plus has them 31st. To me, they feel a little bit closer to that mid-30s, high 30s, low 40s range, just considering what they've lost, the rolling recruiting average. So to me, this feels like one of my favorite bets with an under 5.5 here. When you consider that it's the juice side that's friendly, and having to get to 6 wins with 2 of your 3 most favorable conference games on the road, still having to play Georgia, still having to play Alabama, going to the Swamp, a Tennessee team that I think this might have that game circled, going to Auburn. To me, it'd be very favorable if you could just trade Auburn and Alabama or Tennessee, especially, well, maybe not Tennessee, but I really mean that one just due to the in-state lack of home and field advantage you're going to have there. But if you could trade Alabama, play that one on the road, and get Auburn at home, I'd feel a lot better about your chances here. But for those reasons, I'm going under 5.5. I don't trust Jared Curtis enough to come in and be able to just for sure beat NC State, which I feel like I would need to take over 5.5. I would like to feel extremely confident like that was going to be a 9 or 10 point spread, which I just don't think it's going to be.